Thank you for that introduction, Peter. Certainly when I will come live in Blythe, then I will open a bank account with RBC. It's really a compliment. I work a lot with big corporations. I think I should not be too close to that one. And we do talk about corporate responsibility and what companies should do. And of course, we should all be modest. I've worked in an energy company, a form of energy that's only been around for about 150 years. But you, John, you work in an industry, that's about money. Well, money has not been always around since people were there. But I'm glad to see that RBC really understands the balance sheet that really matters. And it's the balance sheets of talents and challenges, problems and solutions. So I tip my hat for that to you. I also learn, as I always do when I travel, and I wrote down a few things that I'm going to send you, John. One is called the National Think Tank, which I think is a similar thing as RBC Amplify, even though they're doing well. And the other thing you said, I'm going to send you something that is called Hack My Class. These are things that really fit well, and if you allow me, then I will put your report on the STEM Coalition website. And my talk this morning is a little bit about what we're doing there. As you can hear from my name and from my accent, I'm Dutch, although I'm a real flying Dutchman, so if you've never seen one, you're looking at one now. I haven't lived in the Netherlands for the last 30 years. We lived all over the world. It's still going well. Or should I use that one? It's a bit cracky, it's that loose contact. Otherwise, Jacob, just come up, otherwise I'm happy to use that one. So Holland is a very small country. I think it's my cousin will know better. Things fits several times in just Ontario. But we're 18 million people, and it's even more. And we do not span two oceans like you do. You've got a natural advantage with trade because you got the two biggest oceans on either side of your territory. But it is actually home to 3 of the 10 biggest companies in Europe. And we are a poor country in terms of resources. The only resource that we really have that's of value is our talent. And the Dutch have been relatively good at that already over the last 400 or 500 years. It was actually the Portuguese who were the great navigators of the world's oceans and who began with exploration. And we were a little bit bigger than them, so we beat them on the head. And we stole their rudders, so we knew the routes. And then the Dutch ruled the world for quite a while. And Amsterdam, for a number of years, was the richest city in the world, by far. But then we had these neighbors from across the water, the Brits. Well, they were even bigger than we were, so they knocked us on the head. And so that got passed on, and they even created the Commonwealth, which you are part of that as well. Well, all that joking set aside, I wanted to say hello to Elias. He is the most important shareholder in this room, if we take shareholdership being a shareholder in time. But also you guys here, I don't know exactly how old you are, but most of you will live in the 22nd century. And when you will be the age of the education minister, the former premier, this Bill Davis guy, that was 89, when you will be 89, and certainly when Elias will be 89, you will be looking back from the beginning of the 22nd century to today and this time. Like we now look back to those memorial signs 100 years ago. That is what time does. And so since you're young, you are the most important shareholders in time, and the 21st century is your home. Now, for those of you, particularly for the young ones, the important shareholders, I just want to give like a 4 or 5 minute flyover of what we did 2 days ago, because I think it's important for the context. Because I've been working since 2004 on the talent pipeline. And I think Peter, when he called me up, because we all started, yes, oh, you know about STEM, etc., and he Googled me, and he said, but you're not a STEM expert at all. In fact, you're not even an education expert. I said, well, I never claimed one. And he said, but it's strange that somebody with your background in industry, in business, in politics, why on earth do you care about talent? And I said, talent is not an end in its own right, and neither is education. It is a means to arrive at the other end of this century in a civilized and peaceful way. Now there's 2 components to that. It's getting there. Well, if you stay in your bums for 82 years, 2018 plus 82, 2100, that's the easy one. To get there in a civilized and peaceful way is the difficult part, in view of the challenge that we have had, but also the opportunities that we have had. But it's very important to start being conscious of that and aware. And I completely agree with John, and later on I will see that I call that metacognition. The most important skill that you can acquire is the skill to know how to learn. So learn how to learn. That's the most precious competency that you can have. Now, I'm going to begin. Should I push a button, Jacob, or can you do something? Is the antenna, should I take it out in my hand, perhaps, to make this better? Or otherwise, I'll just use this one and switch it off and keep it in my hand. So I actually start with my conclusion, and that is that talent is the most precious resource that we have. Yeah, thank you. You can switch off the other one, right? So we don't get the bottom. So talent is the most precious resource that we have. Just think about your own home. I don't think that in rural life, many of you have got safes at home. I mean, my cousin even, my suitcase did not arrive on the same plane as I had. So it had to be brought in, you know, and British Airways didn't quite realize how far Clinton was from Toronto, but they did. And so we had a bit of a problem. Well, where are we going to leave it? Because he wanted to show me things around. I said, well, no problem, just stick a note on the front door and they'll put it in front of the front door. I said, really? Do you know that I carry a bit more alcohol in there? So it may not be there anymore, so that's quite okay. So that's for that reason, if you trust suitcases to be in front of your house with whiskey bottles in it, then you probably won't have safes in your home either. But you can probably gather that what you keep in the safe is what's most precious to you. And so we should also think as society about what is most precious to us. And that's our talent. And we should use what is most precious to address what is most pressing. You use your best man to fight the most important fight. So that's my conclusion. The number one responsibility of the collective leadership, and it's not only the minister. By the way, minister, I have not been wearing a tie at all, whether it's Canada, so after because I should wear a tie today. I normally do when I'm in the presence of eminence. Be careful though, the colors are those of hell and brimstone. But, so it's the collective responsibility of both leaders in industry and politics to make sure that the most precious resource, talent, is adequately developed to address the most pressing challenges. Now yesterday, and the day before yesterday, we did a bit of a flyover, and I'm now going to make a little bit of a pun thing, John, so stay on your seat, don't get angry at me, because I'm going to seemingly contradict what you said. I showed a film clip of Julia Roberts, who acts as Mother Earth. And these are really beautiful pictures, and in that she says, nature does not need humans. Humans need nature. But nature does not need them. Nature does not even want humans. Humans are, at best, a nice to have. But do you know what the number one source of happiness is? There's many books written about the topic. The number one source of happiness is other humans, other people. So from our perspective, humans are not merely a nice to have. Humans, John, are not merely wanted. Humans are needed for our well-being. The other thing that I mentioned is that it's only been recently, until recently, that windmills only functioned when the wind was blowing, that bricks were baked when the sun was shining, and that watermills were turning when rivers were running. Until, around that time, some mildly clever and highly social apes discovered the cookie jar of fossil fuel. And we've been throwing a party for 150 years since. Now that party will come to an end, and it will have lots of implications, a lot of challenges. And the future will look different. You will see more change in your lives than the previous 5 generations have seen. But you also have more knowledge, you've got computers, so it's a balance sheet that's still in balance, but there's more bigger numbers on it on either side. And the summary that I made on the opening day was, what's really important for leaders is to get real. To get real about reality. Not understand it only superficially, but understand it deeply. And we try to do that by
doing a helicopter overflight over the past, over the present, and into the future. Because what has happened, has happened. What will happen, because of choices we made, or failed to make, will happen. But we still have more choices to make that will impact our future environment. But we have to get real about reality. We also have to get honest in communicating about reality and about expectations. And, my dear friends, we have to get on. Because a lot of people, before they know something here, they know it here. A lot of people feel that not everything is quite okay. That there is some frictions here and there. And that the politicians may not seem always to be in control. Now what do people do when that's what they feel? They send you home. They vote for populists. Now populists are people that walk around with slogans that seem very attractive, but they understand reality even less. And if in a sort of temporary loss of minds, of presence of mind, we vote them in, we actually find that we are in even more dire straits than we were before. So get real, get honest, and get on. The world is much more connected now. Have you guys ever seen this? These colors? These are the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. United Nations, you might argue, is like the government of the world. And they came out only 2 years ago with the 17 goals, as you see here, to transform our world. And people that are very much associated with often walk around with a thing like the letter O there, which each of them, that's the 71, you see the colors here. But if you look at this, these are all good ambitions, but they're not actions. Now, if this is the beginning of actions, then it is good. If there are no actions, then beware of the health warning. We're confronted with motherhood statements. So what we really want to do is we want to get to this. And these are things that you each can do. And there are many more in there, but these are things you can actually do. Because common sense learns us that progress is the result of actions, not ambitions. So, how will we reach the other end of this century in a civilized and peaceful way? Well, I'm a Dutchman, and the road will be by bicycle. I just got some advantages, because all these big SUVs that you drive around, they need a hell of a lot of fuel, so you don't get very far. And you get a pretty wide highway. And with this, I can go over the narrowest of paths and windy ways. But of course, it's only got 2 wheels, not 4. So we need 2 side wheels to help us in the most difficult periods of time, and the most difficult stretches. But the most important wheel is being less short-sighted about reality. That's what I tried to explain on the first day. Don't look back just the last 30, 40 years, because they were demonstrably exceptional. Abnormal. So those that take the last 30, 40 years as their reference framework for normality, you're wrong. You're very wrong. Look further back. Then you get a better impression of what normal is, and a better indication of what back to the future of economics will mean. But understanding that well alone is not enough. And today I'm going to talk about the left-hand side. That is the systemic thinking. And to me, STEM has an official abbreviation. It stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Well, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not a STEM guy. I've worked 30 years with engineers, so it happens it gets all over you, you can't get rid of it. So what I'm going to say, STEM is not more important than history, or art, or many other topics. The reason why I stress STEM is that is where the greatest shortage is. You know the saying that a chain is as strong as the weakest link? The STEM shortage is the weakest link. So we have to work on that. And after that, well, we work on the next weakest link. This part here, I'm not going to talk about, but is also important. Because if we want to find the route for this bicycle to the other end of the century, where Elliot will park the bicycle against the tree of the next century, we have to take decisions. And they have to be quality decisions. Good decisions. And good decisions you can only make with good information. And you all know, you've heard the term fake news, haven't you? Well, fake news and democracy is a pretty dangerous combination. So this is the other side, though. Quality information, quality decisions, understanding of reality, and systemic thinking. So, your minister is a very pretty woman. Much nicer than the French education minister, because he's a guy who I met last week in Paris. And I noticed that sometimes when ministers have been in their job for a little while longer, as you have, Minister Thompson, they kind of get a more flat forehead. And I have that as well. And it's got the same cause. Because, do you guys know what the hardest matter is on this planet? What's the hardest stuff? Any idea? There's a contingent there as well. Some of you might say diamond. Diamond is pretty hard, but you put diamond drills. No, it's not diamond. Titanium? No, it's not that either. Ask the minister. The hardest matter on this planet are national curriculum. To try to change those is incredibly difficult. Even if the ministers want it themselves, they have difficulties in getting it through. And yet it is so important that we actually make sure that we have 21st century education for 21st century challenges. Can you see in the light? Because right here you can see it. Empowering Canadians, Canadian youth, for jobs that do not yet exist, but that will come to exist to solve problems that we're not yet aware of. This is like a triple complexity. Now, if I would want to help my kids, or you, or whoever, with a challenge that I don't know the nature of, what do I give you? If you tell me I'm going to dive for a treasure, well, you get a diving suit, you get goggles, and an air bottle, and flippers. If you say, I'm going to go climb a mountain, I'll give you ropes and spikes in your shoes. But if I don't know what you're going to do, what can I do? What can I give you that will always help you? And that is 21st century education. So actually you can see here, the red part is what you're most familiar with, because that is traditional education, which is typically taught by subjects. History, German, mathematics, geography. And of course there will be more modern subjects as well. Entrepreneurship, robotics. But that's the knowledge, that is what you know. What is also important, how do you use what you know? And actually, I made this way before I met John, and way before I read the RBC report, but this is History C's. Critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and of course, creativity. I don't know if Shanna Ratner in the room at this moment in time? Ah, Shanna. You said, you quoted Einstein, he said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Well, there it is, creativity. And of course, there's also character. How do you engage with the world? Mindfulness, curiosity, courage, resilience, ethics, leadership. Now you might argue, that's not what you can learn, that's given. Well, that's not entirely true. Some of it is given, some have more of it, some have less of it, but you can learn. This here is what I talked about earlier, that's the metacognition. How do you reflect and learn? So those are the dimensions of 21st century education, and I know very few countries where actually they teach all this and in the way they do. Last week in Paris, there was somebody who talked about an approach whereby you don't teach subjects, but you let young people work on a problem that they need to solve. And then they solve the problem, and then once they say, oh, we can't go further. Okay, bracket open, I'll feed you some biology, chemistry, whatever you may need, and then you go back and you continue. And the nice thing is that the teacher at the end of the day said to the class, well, you've been really learning some nice things today, you also learned things about biology. I'm like, no, I have not, I hate biology, I have not learned anything about biology. They said, well, yes, you have, you know, this and this and this. Oh, yeah. So I often compare children with shops. Why do we go to the shops when they're closed? Why do teachers want to sell them stuff when they are not open for business? So I know it's easy to talk about it this way, but it's really important that we actually equip our youth with the skills that they will need in this century, because it will be an enormous century. Now we get a little bit, so there's the penultimate part, a little bit why we stress STEM so much. And then I will share with you what the Netherlands did out of a position of weakness. And sometimes you can learn if people have overcome it. Now this here is actually from a report that came out 3 years ago about the STEM skills mismatch. And this is basically the answer that people got. So you can see here respondents' answer to the feedback received from a negative job interview. So this were the reasons given why a candidate did not get the job. Now this actually starts as a big blamash for companies, because the biggest answer was no feedback. Now every company that interviews a person and does not give feedback is not worth its juice. But of the reasons that were given why they were not given a job, the number one reason was not enough STEM skills. 17, nearly 18%, so that's more than twice as much as what's done here, including, for example, 21st century skills. Now, coding sits here, languages sits here. Well, perhaps in a big country like yours, that's necessary, but if you live on a patchwork of languages, it is necessary. Or soft skills, communication skills, interpersonal skills, or other. Now, think about it, what is, or even work experience, because that's unfair to you guys. So they say, well, we need experience. So you don't have it, so you can't get a job. Yeah, but how do I get experience? If I can't get a first job, I can't get experience. If it's circular thinking, right? But figure, these things are important. But if you have these, if you speak 5 languages, you're a very nice person to talk with, but you cannot think systemically, I'd be very happy to spend an evening with you in the bar, and I'll pay the tab. But I do not want you to come work for me. Because in a way you might say that STEM skills are like a catalyst that switch on the value of other skills. It's not that these are not important, but if you have these and you don't have that, these are worth relatively less. So it's really worthwhile to invest in strengthening skills. Now, in Europe, in some southern European countries, we've got double-digit youth unemployment. And yet we've got 1 million vacancies across the EU. So as John rightly said, we have people without jobs and jobs without people. And then you say, but how come? If I come to Canada and I show you this data, and why don't young people in Europe know this? Well, that's the data challenge that John also spoke about. Why is it not available? And we have to work on that. And we did interview young people and said, why don't you take? So you can see results for all respondents, the reason why they did not choose STEM education. And this is really worrisome. Well, this is perhaps a preference, but why are you inclined to another subject? Probably because another subject is more sexy. Well, then we have to make STEM more sexy. Or difficult. Well, on our website you can see my favorite best practice is a Spanish guy who speaks no English, but he's a great teacher. And of course, as you know, Spanish is not only spoken in Spain, it's spoken in all of Latin America except Brazil. And his website has gotten over 300 million hits over the last 5 years. And last year, he was given the Vakakis Teacher Prize. And the comments that his pupils made about him were just fantastic. Lack of interest in school, uninspiring school teachers, lack of careers perspectives. Well, is that true? How can you have a lack of careers perspective with a STEM education after the data I earlier showed you? So they're wrongly informed. They lack context. So that is the areas where we thought solutions might lie. Now, Minister, this one is particularly important for you and in the context of what I said earlier. This is actually from the McKinsey survey that was called From Education to Employment. And they asked the same question to 3 groups of constituencies. And the question was, are school leavers adequately prepared for the future? So first they asked the employers, are the people that you hire out of school, are they adequately prepared to do the job that you want to let them do? 35% only agree. So that means 65% of the employers say, the staff we hire is simply not good enough schooled to do the job. Now, if you're a great company, and a big company, just like RBC, they've got the facilities to up-train people to do that. But here in this room, there are lots of SMEs. Well, they have the knowledge, but maybe not the time to school up people. That, by the way, is also a great reason why internships are great, because it helps people get more reality pro. Then we ask the youth, what do you think yourself? Do you feel adequately equipped to do the first job on the job market that you're trained for? 38% said yes. So the majority said no. And then we went to the directors of the school establishment. And guess what? We did a fantastic job. Now, if this would have been 40 or 45, you know, I understand perspective, you know, if it's your own product, you always think it's better. But 74 is more than 2 times this. This is not possible. So, we got 2 possibilities. Either there's a huge misunderstanding about the meaning of adequate. That's possible. Hey, we're talking adequate, right? So I think the real problem is a lacking sense of reality in the educational establishment. And that actually brought us to the idea that we should carry this at a much broader platform in society. And we call that triple helix. Triple helix just means 3 legs. Now figure, you know, you can actually put the table on 1 leg, but you really have to pin it in the ground, otherwise it will fall over. 2 legs doesn't really stand, right? It's only from 3 onwards that you get a plane. Remember from mathematics? 1 point is a point, 2 points is a line, 3 points is a plane. Did you get it all? So that's why a triple stamp platform is a more stable platform. And so what we see, if you really are interested in securing future-proof education, it has to be triple helix, and it is indispensable that these 3 parties work together. Obviously the government, because of their responsibility. Obviously the schools, because that's where education takes place. But also enterprise or society or NGOs, what have you, should be involved. And so in our STEM coalition, we have seen that triple helix setup is the #1 key factor of success to be successful. They're all different. None of our platforms are identical, they're not clones of each other, they're all like grown in history, but you can only be a member of our best practice exchange if you do have 3 legs. Because we just know if you've got an initiative that got 2 legs, and it doesn't matter what combination, statistical analysis shows you will not be around for very long and you will not be successful. So that is the key factor of success. But having said that, topics like environmental history or media literacy is also important. Now I want to share with you just an example of what happened in the Netherlands. And I should give you some context there. Few of you will have heard of the Lisbon Objective because it's quite frankly not relevant for Canada, but there was a big conference of the heads of state in Lisbon in the year 2000. And they said, well, you know, if we look at the sort of geostrategic developments in the world, you know, we've got an aging population, all the others getting bigger, Europe, the total surface is Europe, you know, I mean, actually all of Europe fits in Australia, probably in Canada as well, I'm not sure about that, but it wouldn't surprise me. So from a natural resource base, we're not too good, so there were a lot of concerns. And these leaders set a stake in the ground. And they said, what does it take to make from Europe the most competitive, knowledge-based, economic bloc in the world by 2010? I have to make another appellate. I have to ask for your mercy. When one of you travels to Europe shortly, and you happen to get to Brussels, please don't mention this, because I believe it's 2018 now, if I checked this morning. So we still haven't quite achieved that, although the stake was for 2010. But more relevant is that all the heads of state were sent back home with the mission, do look what you need to do in your member state to pull your share of the overall weight in achieving that objective. The Dutch Prime Minister went home and he started looking at statistics, and you can see the graph here. So in 1990, which was 10 years before that Lisbon meeting, we had more than 4,000 people in STEM faculties. And at the time of the Lisbon conference, you can see over here, it was less than half. So in just 10 years, the number of people enrolled in STEM faculties had just halved. And the trend was going down further. As you can see, it varied a little bit by discipline. Some disciplines were really decimated. And so he said, well, we've got a problem here with the proportion of students going into STEM. And so he said, well, we have to talk. At the same time, here you see some logos that even you in Canada may know, certainly Philips and Unilever and Shell, those are companies that have a presence here in Canada as well. The others are chemical and paint company, but they're quite big in their own side. They also had a concern. They said, we cannot find enough STEM graduates in the Netherlands to come and work for us. So this was an extremely august constellation of politicians and industrialists coming together saying, I need to talk with you. Yeah, I need to talk with you as well. Well, I want to talk with you about this. Well, that's the same thing I want to talk about with you. So they did come to an agreement, and that is where JETNet was born. JETNet just stands for Youth and Technology Network, and I just want to show you this little clip. It's 2 minutes, and you can see how we worked that out. Oh, there we go.
Technology is all around us, in water and energy, travel and transport, lifestyle and design, but also in food. Our economy is built on technology and knowledge. Our lives are built on technology. We can no longer imagine life without technology. Since 2012, the Netherlands is among the top 5 most competitive knowledge economies in the world. The Dutch government has the ambition to strengthen this position. This requires new and smart answers for the future. Currently, 2 out of 10 students successfully complete a technical study. In order to keep a top position in the future, we need more students that choose a study and a career in science and technology. In the Netherlands, 5 leading Dutch companies anticipated a shortage in students with a technical degree. 10 years ago, Shell, Unilever, AkzoNobel, Philips and DSM decided to take action. A foundation was laid. Why? In order to keep our top position. To face up to the increase in aging population and the shortage of technically skilled personnel, 2 out of 10 students that choose a technical education is not enough. To keep our economy on top, we need at least 4 out of 10 that choose science and technology. That's a fact. How? Simple. By getting youngsters excited about science and technology, by connecting companies and schools, and by arousing their interest in technical studies and careers. Schools and companies can collaborate in providing the students with experiences which show that science and technology are challenging, meaningful, and socially relevant. By adding context to scientific and technical subjects, JETNet improves the existing curriculum in different ways. Some examples are workshops, guest lessons, company visits, and so on. As far as JETNet is concerned, experiencing technology personally is the best way to promote it. Therefore, JETNet advocates an approach of learning by doing, which is incorporated in all of our activities. Secondly, JETNet focuses on an improved perception of the prospects of a technology-based career choice. Students become more aware of the jobs they'll be able to fulfill in the future with a science education by both meeting with role models and experiencing the working life in the technology sector. A few examples are career days, Girls' Day, expert meetings, and debating contests. This dual approach validates the goals of JETNet. Companies and schools connect, cooperate, and share knowledge on a one-on-one basis. That's the reason for JETNet's success. How successful? Here's a short list. JETNet has 87 connected companies, 171 active JETNet schools, 31 partners, over 600 activities, a reach of over 60,000 students a year. So, that's JETNet, a powerful example in Europe, as Mr. Barroso said. He also tagged JETNet as a good practice in Europe. And now, the Dutch approach inspired even the Danish to launch their own JETNet. JETNet, inspiring a new generation for industry and technology.
Now this is actually 4 years old, and even this has gone exponential because there's several other countries who have copied it now, and some more openly than others say, well, we just modeled on there. Because actually for best practice transferring, it's very important to create a culture where that happens. Often, people say, well, that's maybe a better idea, my idea, but if I adopt another idea, then I do not get promoted, so people have a kind of resistance. So good companies and good cultures actually have a value when you say, I built on his idea, or I took that idea from him and then combined it with that. So this kind of mindset and culture on a values level is very important as well. So as you can see, since 2002, so we've been going now for 40 years, you've seen all that as well. I want to go to one-on-one regional school company partnerships. Some of the bigger companies, I know a company that is actually connected with 30 schools. The numbers may not sound very big to you, but remember this is just like a corner of Ontario. So it covers about 1/3 of all the secondary schools now that lead up to university. And we also started a JetNet Junior, so that is for primary schools, because we know that young people already at around the age of 8, 9 begin to say, well, I want to care for something, I want to discover more. So a first orientation is being made already before they go to secondary school, and so you have to capture their imagination at that time. Well, you've heard this in the film, so guest lectures, workshop, company visits, educational material, talks with experts, project weeks. This is, for example, where they work on problems with experts on site. And when they get stuck in the problem, they get on-site, relevantly injected educational what they need at that moment in time, when of course they're completely open like a sponge to take that on because it's relevant to their actions. And also information about the job market. You probably heard we run a special program for girls, because we kind of culturally often give screwdrivers and cars to our boys and dolls to our daughters. But we should give the girls screwdrivers as well, and also dolls to the boys. We should look at that in a much more holistic way, because the challenges we will be facing in the 21st century really mean all hands on deck. Career days, career day on tour, meet the boss. This is actually quite interesting. So sometimes they even meet with the CEOs of companies. A little bit I had to think of that when you, John, were talking about there Mackay talking with these youngsters. You go and solve our problems over the summer. That is done in the smaller, on a company scale there. Online guest lectures, Junior Innovation Challenge, company trainings, online tools. And as I said, so 1/3 of the pre-university secondary schools are in there now, over 100 companies. And the results have been that over the 10-year period, and this has gone slow, because it's a 5 to 15% higher STEM uptake in schools that participate in this program compared to schools that do not participate in this program. Now, you say, well, that's not very much over a long period of time, but I always talk about the talent pipeline. And people say, well, you can't let go your old energy industry where you talk about physical pipelines, but it is a pipeline. Only you don't measure it in kilometers, but you measure it in time. But the principles are the same. Nothing will come out of a pipeline that's not put in at the beginning. But not everything you put in at the beginning will come out, because you can have leaks. So first of all, you have to make sure that you get as much talent into the pipeline, and then make sure it stays in the pipeline so that it comes out as a graduate. Now, where I am slightly more liberal than my colleagues of the Dutch platform, say, well, Hans, we need that, we need more engineers to go into industry and research. And the answer is yes, and I don't disagree with that. But actually you should look, where is the shortage of systemic thinking greatest? Well, that's not in research labs, and typically not in businesses. Because if there's no systemic thinking in the business, that business does not exist the next year. So the greatest shortage I find is actually the softer parts of society, including politics. So I would very much promote that people with a systemic thinking background enter politics, and they're great examples. The Director General, and if you ever come to Europe, Minister Thompson, I'd be very happy to introduce both of you. She's a Greek lady, she's a chemical engineer. She's only worked one job as a chemical engineer and then decided to go on policymaker, because she said, I think I can be a bigger lever on moving things by using my skills, doing that there. She's doing it in an absolutely fantastic way, but they are two rare examples to have that. What's our ambition? We want to upscale both in size. Right now we're 100 companies, we want to go to 2,000 companies. The reason why that stretch is more difficult is that if you do 100, so you do all the big companies, they can actually dedicate staff full time to this program. If you get to SMEs, they have the knowledge, but they cannot leverage so easily, you know, the guy who runs a plant for half a day to go to school, because then he's not at the plant. So actually in regions, we actually work together. Said, well, you 5 companies, well, you should have an interest in the school because most of your employees come from those 5 schools. Yeah, we've got an interest, but we don't have the time. So what we arrange is that we work together and we do make a call on each of them once a quarter, but not on all 5 of them. But in the presentation, they present all 5 companies. And so they do that by turn, and so you make the weight on the shoulders of these SMEs smaller. And that is why we think we can go to over 2,000 companies, and we want to go to 1,000 schools, which basically means all schools. Increasing the effect, of course, of activities by stimulating knowledge sharing within the network, and we've started the further internationalization of this best practice sharing from JetNet, which is only in the Netherlands, to the EU STEM Coalition, of which I am the ambassador. And this is my final slide on that, so this is our website there. This is actually the European Commissioner, so your counterpart, Minister, Thibaut Navracsics, happens to be an Hungarian, and he is responsible for education and culture and sport. You can see various events here, you know, task force meeting, networking, individual partners come up there. Very important, with an average annual return of 12%, engineering and computer science graduates see the biggest return on investment according to the World Economic Forum 2016. And I just would like to close by showing you another short video clip about the internationalization, how we started sharing what we've been doing in the Netherlands.
In 2002, a number of influential Dutch companies observed a shortage in university-trained technologists. This led to the establishment of JetNet.
We see that the schools who participate in JetNet are doing a lot better in terms of number of students who are interested.
JetNet provides secondary school scholars with challenging activities.
I'm not saying that technology is a silver bullet that will solve all problems, but it is very clear that without technology we have got no chance at all.
The further development of education is one of the central topics at JetNet.
Secure that we innovate, that we grow.
We must get more talent directed towards these pressing challenges.
I think it's important from a societal perspective for the developments that we need to go through in the future.
Particularly industry connecting with education.
It addresses one very crucial issue.
There is still much ground to be won, and challenging future objectives remain in place.
Education is such a fundamental need.
To spend most money on things that are most important. The government is involved as well.
It's quite a success.
So we are certainly not there in Europe, far from it. We still got a long way to go. But as a closing remark, I just want to give you a demonstration of my really, truly incredible mathematical capability. I mean, John said you don't have to be a mathematician, but I'm really close to the Nobel Prize winning ability. 1 plus 1 is 3, because the plus value as well. And so I think cooperation, what you're doing here as well, Peter, you know, bringing different people together, that's actually the very source of innovation. It's at the interfaces of different spheres that the sparks fly over. So a huge compliment to you. I mean, I've been quite impressed, you know, being a city slicker who's even lived in a city that has got nearly twice the population of Canada. So there's 32 million people living in one city. To hear about, well, there's 20 people in Kingsbridge. They got 1,000, what do you say, three in Blythe, you know. I said, wow, and on that small basis, they do all that. My cap off to you all. Thank you very much for your attention.